How is it that for Jewish Americans, the best coverage of Israel news and the Middle East, U.S. policy towards Israel, is on the Christian Broadcasting News?
Well, isn't that interesting how God works, right? We like to say God uses imperfect people to accomplish his perfect will. But look, here's the answer. Because the Old Testament and the New Testament are one huge, big love letter from God. And when I say love letter, there's some rough stuff in the Bible as it relates to a lot of the stories. But the bottom line is Judaism, Christianity, Jews and Christians very much linked together through the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so you put it all together, and you have and I want to be very clear on this: true Bible-believing Christians, because there's a lot of folks that call themselves Christians and are doing some things that are absolutely not only not Christian, but not supportive of the Jewish people. Those are not who I'm talking about, okay? Those people are off the reservation. But when it comes to true Bible-believing evangelical Christians, they're the biggest supporters of Israel because they know that the histories are linked, that they know that God has a special covenant with the Jewish people. And I can just go on, but it starts in Genesis and goes from there.
So maybe it got started that way to be covering Israel, but it doesn't seem that the reportage is skewed because of faith or towards faith or to some apocalyptic or eschatological perspective. They're reporting it according to what any American or democratic free person who holds the value of freedom and individual liberty would want that kind of reporting. And yet we don't see that on the mainstream networks anymore. But CBN has the top secular Middle East reporting, not because of their faith. What's the ethic there on this subject?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I would say, and before I get to ethic, let me get to faith. It does start with a biblical perspective. Everything CBN News does is through a biblical lens, and so that is the lens. So it begins and ends there. Having said that, along with the faith element, if you will, is an ethical element, and that ethical element is to get to the truth, to tell the truth. And the way you tell the truth is you don't buy into a narrative that is spoon-fed to you by a legacy media that has an agenda. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of folks in there that don't have a biblical worldview. So it's hard sometimes to garner the truth, or get the truth from folks that are not necessarily seeing the world through the biblical prism. And so CBN starts there. And so I think that's why you see a different sense of ethics, because you got to understand the truth is not, how do I say this? Sometimes the truth is simple, but sometimes it's a little bit more complicated. And I think CBN goes into the nuances of it. The legacy media, the mainstream media, the liberal media, call them whatever you want, they like to tell quick stories, as we like to call them, sexy stories, stories that will grab a headline, but not really tell the full complexity of the story. I think CBN gets into the complexities, and more importantly, even gets into the people behind the stories, and I think that's what makes the difference.